So, Dr. Fauci, you were in M&T Bank Stadium last week with the vice president, with the governor, a host of other people. What are your impressions of that facility, and what do you think of the tour?
Well, it's really quite impressive the how well organized the entire process is, and and you pull a few people aside and you ask them their opinion, and you really get the real true scoop of it. And everybody said it was remarkably efficient and convenient to do. You got parking spaces, you got lined up the different booths. It was kind of interesting to see that places where people would formally be having a beer or buying a hot dog is a booth for the computers, a booth to sign in, a booth for the pharmacy, a booth to get injected, a booth to wait after you do it. It was really impressive. I was very, very positively impressed.
So there seems to be some hesitancy in Baltimore City, where about 25% of the population has been vaccinated, a little bit more. Why do you think that is? It's in other parts of the state, but in Baltimore City as well, and right outside of DC and PG County as well. Why do you think there's still hesitancy at this point?
There are so many different reasons for that. I don't think it's a unidimensional phenomenon. I think a lot of it is people who are, wanting to wait and see, kind of reluctant to do that. There are some that might understandably mistrust a government-sponsored medical issue because of the sort of checkered history going back decades and decades that get translated from generation to generation. And I think that's the reason why what we have to do, and I think we can get around this hesitancy by making sure that we really implement this program that we put together for equity in the distribution. And that is to get trusted messengers. There's a program called the COVID Community Corps, which is literally thousands of trusted messages that the people in the community, including the community of Baltimore, feel confidence in. Instead of having, I go out and do a lot of discussions about why it's important, but I'll bet you that someone who lives in downtown Baltimore and Prince George's County, they hear it from a sports figure or an entertainment figure, or importantly, their own clergy or their family doctor. Those are the ones that they trust. So what we're trying to do is to get those trusted messengers mobilized to get out into the community to explain to people without being accusatory, without waving your finger at them for not getting vaccinated, to say, let's talk about why you don't want to get vaccinated. And you could go to each and every point and counter it. Because the one thing that you do have is you have the data to show that vaccines historically have ended epidemics. It's remarkable when you sit down with people and answer their simple questions about why they have hesitancy or concern, that you can get the overwhelming majority of people to be able to really finally say, if I do it for myself, but also for my family and for the community, because what people sometimes don't realize is that they hear that younger people, which is the truth, it's not made up, when they get infected, the likelihood of their having a serious outcome is considerably less than if an elderly person or someone with an underlying condition gets infected. They have much more of a risk of hospitalization and serious outcome. But what young people need to appreciate is that even though you don't get any symptoms if you get infected, you are nonetheless, by allowing yourself to get infected, you're propagating the outbreak. So you're becoming part of the problem as opposed to part of the solution, because what you might do is get infected, and because you're young and healthy, you don't get any symptoms, but you can then pass the infection on to someone else, who would then pass it on to someone else, who then might actually get seriously ill. So it's a combination of a personal responsibility for your own health and a societal responsibility to make sure you're not part of the phenomenon of spreading the infection around the community.
A health officer told me last week that in here in Baltimore County, that we're at the point where the supply is outweighing the demand. Governor Hogan said we're not just near that, but he said there's a plateau is coming. Do you fear that that's coming, and is it coming too soon?
Well, I think that inevitably will happen, because as you diminish the size of the cohort that needs to be vaccinated, it becomes a little bit more difficult to get that smaller group vaccinated, because as you get more vaccine coming in, you may wind up having more vaccine than you have people who are willing to step forward. That's the reason why you want to diminish that chiasm between the two. You want to make them actually be one and one equal. As the vaccine comes in, people get it. Remember that not too long ago, there was a lot of people lined up to get vaccinated. We didn't have enough vaccine. And that's the reason why we had to give the priority ranking of 1A, 1B, 1C, and things like that. But we're not there now. We're on the other side of the coin.
When the vaccine production started, many were hopeful because Emergent Biosolutions and their production facility here in Baltimore was going to pump out a lot of the J&J vaccine. That ran into all kinds of problems with the FDA. Have you been talking to the FDA? Are you confident that that production facility is going to be able to produce vaccine? Because it appears now there's other parts of the world that could really use it, namely India.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's the reason why the facility was built, to be able to make vaccines not only for people here in the United States, but globally. I certainly hope the FDA is not going to allow any products to come out of any facility unless they're confident as to the safety, the reproducibility, and all the other things that they look at. So I hope that gets resolved soon, because we do need to get those doses out to the people who need them.
On reopening things, because our Florida station will want this too. Florida's governor said today he's dropping the state of emergency and essentially going to reverse course when it comes to coronavirus restrictions. Is that a good idea?
Well, it really depends upon the level of infection in a given community. Like each community, each state, each city almost certainly differs from the other. As a country, the 7-day average of daily infections is still unreasonably high. We can't declare victory. We just can't all of a sudden say we're there where we want to be. It may differ from community to community. Some may be better than others. I would just encourage all the communities, don't pull back prematurely. Make sure that you continue to get people vaccinated, because that's going to be the ultimate solution. And if you still have a high degree of infection in your community, you don't want to pull back on all public health measures.
It's been a big topic here on WBAL as far as kids getting back in school. There's been a lot of plans. I'm sure you hear this question all the time. Should kids be back in person 5 days a week in the fall? And is it better to be back in class? Are they suffering with their mental health? What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's absolutely better to have kids in person going to school. There's no doubt about that. I mean, that's not even arguable. That's something that really you must strive for. I believe that we will be able to get kids back to school for the fall term. I really do. And the reason is, by that time, hopefully, we'll have the overwhelming majority of our population vaccinated. The high school kids will almost certainly be able to be vaccinated to get into the fall term. And elementary school kids will have to wait a bit longer, but that's no reason not to send them back to school, because you have now 80% or more of the teachers and the teaching personnel that support teaching are getting vaccinated. So with all of that, I would predict, and I feel pretty certain about it, that there's no reason at all not to have the kids back in school in the fall term.
When are we going to be able to stop wearing the masks?
That really is also dependent upon the level of infection in the community. You get that level down, you're going to see more and more flexibility on the part of the CDC's recommendations. Right now, they say you can be in the home with other vaccinated people. You can have physical contact. You don't need to wear masks. Now you can go outside. Obviously, it's a very low risk outside. You can travel safely without a mask. I think as the weeks go by and more people get vaccinated, the CDC is likely going to be much more flexible in their recommendations.
But there's some communities that are pushing back on the CDC saying we still want people to wear a mask. I mean, is that sending a confusing message? Do you think?
Well, you got to be careful when you say wearing a mask. Wearing a mask under what circumstances? I mean, you don't want to go into a area of the country, a city, a state, a county, where you have a high level of infection into a crowded indoor restaurant without a mask. You don't want to go into a crowded indoor bar without a mask. I mean, that's the point. Going in a place, going outside, there are so many things that you can do without a mask outside. It's a very low risk.
All right, Dr. Anthony Fauci, as always, we love having you here. We'll hope to talk to you again sometime soon. Thanks for joining us here on WBAL.
My pleasure. Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.